My name is Kelly O'Brien, and I lead both the Alliance for Regional Development and the Chicago Central Area Committee. If you're not familiar with our organizations, the Alliance was created in 2012 after the publication of a 300-page roadmap for how to grow the regional economy published by the OECD. The OECD determined that 21 counties in the Milwaukee, Chicagoland, Northwest Indiana corridor operate as an economic unit, and that all three states would benefit by working together. And so stakeholders from the three states created the Alliance for Regional Development. The sister organization, the Chicago Central Area Committee, was created in 1956 and has been at the forefront of planning and development and really positioning the city to be the global destination that it is today. We started this webinar series back in March in response to the pandemic. And in June, we rebranded the webinar series Disruption, Driving Innovation, and Embracing Economic Change. That's the tagline for the 2020 summit that we will be hosting in partnership with the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. This will be our 7th summit, but it will be a first from the standpoint that it will be virtual instead of an in-person conference. We'll have more details to share, but please mark your calendar for the week of November 16th and watch your emails for more information. Before I introduce our speaker, I do want you to know that we encourage questions, and we ask that you use the Q&A button on the bottom of the screen, and I'll do my best to relay them to Lou. So I wanted to start off by just asking the audience, did you know that Chicago ranks 3rd after London and New York in terms of its vibrancy of the theater scene? And you know who we have to thank in large measure for that? None other than our guest speaker, Lou Raizin. And Lou has spent over 40 years in the entertainment industry. He's the founder and president of Broadway in Chicago. He focuses on economic development, tourism, and supporting culture in Chicago, all topics we want to make sure we touch on today. He has been named in Chicago Magazine as one of Chicago's top 100 most powerful Chicagoans, and he is profiled more than once in Forbes magazine. And I have to say that, Lou, I know I mentioned when I logged on that you spoke to the CCAC members and probably the summer of 2018, so maybe 2 years ago now, but I still hear about that presentation and how visionary you are and the enthusiasm that you're able to generate with your big ideas. So I'm looking forward to our conversation. And is there anything that I missed about your background that you want to share with the audience?
Well, I think you're giving me more credit than I deserve. I'm not nearly responsible for the 250 theaters that make up our great city. That's been going on for an awful long time. I take credit for the 5 theaters that are Broadway in Chicago. And maybe I should start there and giving everybody a little sense as to who we are at Broadway in Chicago and then move out from there. We are the large downtown theaters. We're the Palace, we're the CIBC, we're the Broadway Playhouse. We have this exclusive theatrical rights at the Auditorium, and we're also the Nederlander Theater, formerly the Oriental. So with those theaters, we are blessed with the opportunity of bringing Broadway to Chicago. And with that blessing comes an awful lot of responsibility and an awful lot of operating costs that still hit us even in these dark times. One of the things that I really want to talk about is that this is a incredibly difficult time for culture and the arts. And though I live in the for-profit world, we are the ones that have to work hard for every dollar we make because they're all earned, and they're earned through ticket sales and the audience supporting our shows, as opposed to the not-for-profit world, who between 50 and 70% of their revenues comes from donors, comes from the philanthropic world. And that philanthropic community has a tug of war right now. There are all kinds of people pulling on them for needs, urgent needs in these crazy times. But at the same time, if they lose their support from the philanthropic side, they go down. I sit on the board of a number of not-for-profit theaters, and I'm the asshole on their board trying to keep them fiscally responsible and talking to them about how those dollars work and what do those revenues look like, and banking up dollars to produce the kind of great work you want to do. And but for those not-for-profits, we wouldn't see a lot of work that Chicago sees. The reality is that those budgets are so frail. When I'm sitting on the boards, their budget is basically comprised of last year's losses plus whatever they need for this year to produce the work they're producing. But it's been said that Chicago is from a tech standpoint, you look at Silicon Valley and you understand what's being produced there. Chicago's the Silicon Valley for theater. There are more startup theaters in Chicago than anywhere else in the country. There is no other city in the world that does the amount of new work on the stages at any given day than happens here in Chicago. So though we bring in the big shows, I hope we support all of those other theaters at the same time. But it's incredibly difficult time. You think about the federal support that was out there with PPP, and there were a number of those not-for-profits that were able to get supported, when those were put out. The problem we have with Broadway in Chicago is we're too big. We employ over 1,000 people during the course of the year, so we don't meet a couple of the tests that came about for PPP. So, we bleed like all other theaters bleed, but the bigger you are, the more you bleed, and we're bleeding badly. Though we don't carry debt, the reality we face is we do own real estate. And with that real estate comes real estate taxes and all the other obligations that go along with it. So, a couple of $1 million here and there on real estate taxes aren't fun when you're making tens of millions of dollars of refunds in tickets. And you couple that with, some of the idiosyncrasies of how ticket sales work in Chicago, where the city under Rahm decided they saw how well Hamilton was doing and imposed what I call a Hamilton tax. We were taxed on an admissions tax at 5% of every dollar we sold, and that doubled overnight, and it's still in place today. So we have a 10% tax, and in addition to that 10% tax, not in addition to, but the way the city collects that tax is it's paid at the time the ticket sale is made. So when we refund the tens of millions of dollars that we do in tickets, we can't tell the patron we're only refunding you 90%. The other 10, you have to wait for the other 10% until we get it from the city. So we refund 110%. We're out 10%. And now we go through a laborious auditing process with the city to see what happens next. That's just a little slice of the amount of fun that we have every day as we contemplate, what theater looks like for the next year, 2 years, 3 years. And part of the problem we face is, what's that crystal ball tell us? It's awful fuzzy right now. And it all starts with the single biggest issue we have is when do we open?
Right.
And to think about when do we open, it's also how do we open? We anticipate that we'll be spending 120% on marketing for 70% of the audience at best. Uh, when will our patrons feel comfortable coming into the venues? We've developed a 60-page set of protocols that speak about how we'll operate the venue, the cleaning, the safety issues, the temperature checks, the one piece after another. But as safe as the venue is, we can open it up. But if the patrons aren't comfortable, it's worthless. You couple that with issues like touring Broadway. What happens when that touring show, let's say they're playing a city before us, and they get sick, somebody gets sick? Do you isolate that person? Do you quarantine that show? Do you skip the next city? So it's really a three-dimensional calculus we play as we think through all of these issues relating to how we come back and what's it look like. We look at things like we have all of the unions that we interface with. Each of those unions are developing their own protocols. And now we have to nest those protocols together. But the bottom line from our standpoint is Broadway, touring Broadway, and Broadway in Chicago will have been the first to close in the pandemic and most likely the last to open, because our economics don't work with social distancing or reduced capacity. So it's a tough, dicey space to be in at this time. You can look at creative ways of producing work. You can Zoom a show, you can put up videos of old shows that have played, but that magic happens live in the theater. And that magic employs an awful lot of people. That magic, from Broadway in Chicago's perspective, is responsible for hundreds of millions of dollars of economic output in the city. I had a friend of mine, a real estate person and restaurateur, say to me, "When are you opening?" And I'm giving him some projections. And he said, "Because we don't intend to open until you open." So that, starts to put the added burden, on an already big burden as we think about how to operate and what do we do. Our protocols deal with things like touchless bathrooms, retrofitting the space so you're not touching anything, touchless ticketing. So when you come in, we don't touch your ticket. You're holding up your cell phone with your ticket on it. We've got temperature checks. Your wrist is scanned as you come in, and nobody's touching you on their side. But what do you do if there's a person that refuses to wear a mask? You think about that legal issue. You have an ADA issue, you have a HIPAA issue. You have all those things to think about as to how they enter that venue and your responsibility in keeping everyone safe, the responsibility in keeping our employees safe, the responsibility in keeping the actors safe, and the responsibility in keeping the patrons safe. So it's a crazy world, but it's it is something that when we first went down on the 13th, we said, well, this will be a couple weeks, maybe a month, maybe 2 months, and as Groundhog Day continued to go on, those days get those dates get pushed further and further. We kept scheduling and rescheduling our shows, and got to a point where we just said, stop. It doesn't make sense to do anything at the moment. The governors from New York, Illinois, and California have a pretty similar mindset in terms of when they determine it to be safe to open, and it's with vaccines and therapeutics. And so we're rooting heavily for science. But one of the things that I am also adamant about, and I really do believe it's our path back, and that is contact tracing tied to admissions. I know there's a huge concern about Big Brother, and we've been working with a team out of MIT, out of the Media Lab at MIT, who is now developing, who's working on the backbone of what Apple and Google have put out, but has taken it further. They have multi-layers in terms of how they deal with their protocols, but ultimately it works pretty simply. No one knows who you are, and you don't know who anyone else is. All the data is recorded on your own phone. But what happens with a cell phone is your phone is always trying to connect with others. It's continually searching for Wi-Fi to connect you to Wi-Fi. It's looking for GPS so it can tell you your location. And it's trying to connect from a Bluetooth standpoint to anything you can log into. When you walk in your car, you're connected to your car's stereo. You walk into your home or office, you're connected to your Wi-Fi. That's the kind of connection your phone is making, but it's always searching things out. So along that search that takes place, this not-for-profit foundation out of MIT says, if we collect that data for 14 days, we're able to look back at everyone or every other phone you've come in contact with during that 14 days. If you think about how the isolation works when the city or state is saying that our capacity needs to be maintained at not more than 10 people or 50 people or 250 people, depending on which side of the business you're in. What they're really trying to do is contain an outbreak. If there is a case, you want to isolate that case and contain it as quickly as possible in order to manage it. With contact tracing, you're able to do that. You're able to say, Kelly, you get an alert on your phone. You have this app on your phone, and it says, Kelly, you were exposed to somebody that's tested positive for COVID 12 days ago. You were within 20 feet for a minute and a half. We don't believe that to be an issue, but we're alerting you nonetheless. The two issues are the amount of time and proximity of the exposure. Kelly gets another response that says, alert, that says, Kelly, you were exposed for 2.5 hours and you were within 5 feet of someone that's tested positive, and that was 4 days ago. We believe you should be looking at your symptoms. Here's the following things to watch out for. Here's where you go. Here's what you do. Here's how you get tested. That's a way of isolating. If I have somebody in the third row exposed that comes out to be testing positive in the next week or two, there's no reason for somebody in the balcony to be concerned because that exposure was really non-existent. If you put out a notification that if you were at the theater on this night, you should be self-isolating, that's not necessarily what science tells us. But if we do that contact tracing tied to admissions, I believe it's the way back, not only for theater, but for sports, for concerts, for conventions. Any place where you have mass gathering, that's the kind of system we need to think about. And they take it even a step further. They really look at it more like weather. They said that, the country spends fortunes to analyze our weather, to be able to predict the weather. And that prediction comes from history. And so what they believe is they can forecast the problems. They can tell you where, like GPS and Waze, to stay away from this area, to move away from this. There's huge amount to be gained by supporting contact tracing. And it's not just for this pandemic. If we look at what's happened, the Phantom of the Opera played in Korea. And we looked at what was going on there, and we looked at their reaction and their response to it. And it turned out that the presenter of Phantom comes over to the company manager for Phantom and says, look, don't worry. We have a pandemic every 2 years. Here's what we do. And so it was like, they're sweating and they're saying, what do we do? What do we do? The sky is falling. We're hiding under our mattresses. They wear masks. They have contact tracing. And they know what their protocols are. They know how to clean the venues. They know how to isolate, and life goes on. I'm not saying that's our new future, but I'm saying that preparation, not only for this one, and we'll be ready for the next pandemic, that's for sure. But we need to be thinking not only about now, but at the future at the same time. But I go back.
A lot of interesting topics. And I, again, want to invite the audience to submit questions. Lou, you're spot on in terms of course, like always, looking at how invention and innovation can really help us achieve our goals. And the goal, of course, is reopening. But one question that I know the audience has been interested in, and keep in mind, we do have a multi-state audience, and excuse the background noise. We have our weekly lawn service happening outside. But that being said, we have several questions in regard to would people purchase tickets for a show that was going to be happening in the last Q3, Q4 of this year. Are you saying that they have already been refunded, and that there's no ticket sales happening right now? Just kind of help us understand what's happening in real time.
When we made the moves we made, we gave the patrons the option to either keep their tickets to the new date or to refund them. But when you're making a move and moving a show 9 months, 10 months, you can't expect somebody to say, oh, I'm busy on that Tuesday, 9 months from now. So we gave them that option, but we are still selling tickets, and our shows we're going to be coming up in the not too distant future as well.
Well, that was my next question. So are you going to have performances with just that limited audience? Is that an option that people will have?
No, we will not limit, we will not reduce capacity. We will not social distance. So we will be waiting until science tells us we're good to go. Right now, we initially thought November was that kind of a date. Mm-hmm. Now we're focused on after the first of the year.
Okay. We have a question from the audience, and it reads, what's your opinion on the future of digital theater post-pandemic?
There are a lot of people testing a number of things out there from digital theater. There's a series being put out that will be announced shortly that's 9 episodes of 10 minutes each. It's a play that almost works through Zoom. It's a Zoom performance. You're seeing each of these actors who are isolated doing their roles, but they stitch them all together. It's an interesting way of thinking about things, but again, it's not going to drive the economics. It's not going to support the city. It's not going to put that person into a restaurant or into a cab to support that industry as well.
Well, and there's the stereotypical starving artist, and obviously they have really been hit with the theaters closing. Is there any kind of social network or support that you have seen that reach out to kind of help some of the performers that, were gainfully employed and happy in March and now obviously won't have work conceivably?
Well, that starving artist was there in March, and it's much more difficult for them now. Mm-hmm. But we are doing a number of things right now with the League of Chicago Theaters, supporting the artists there at the League of Chicago Theaters, and also the Illinois Arts Coalition, who is not only supporting artists that are broader than just theater itself, but are lobbying for legislation to support those workers in the industry.
You have been a real force behind Choose Chicago, which is the entity focused on tourism. What can you say about tourism and what the projections are of when people will be traveling and visiting our fine city again?
Well, I think the when is difficult. The how they travel is more, I think, more clear.
Okay.
That the anticipation is that we're going to be seeing more drive get vacations, more staycations,
Mhm.
and so we don't see the air travel being the first thing that starts to come up. And when you take into account that from an economic perspective, the further we bring a tourist into the city, the more they spend. If we
Mhm.
bring somebody in from Asia, they spend more than if we bring somebody in from Davenport, Iowa. So, we're not going to, even though the goals for Choose are to be lofty and to look for those long hauls coming in, it's not the expectation at the onset.
You may have touched on this, but you may want to elaborate because one of the audience members is asking, how will live theater be changed due to COVID-19? What can we look forward to for the theater world?
So when I talk about the protocols, we have a number of things that we have to deal with. We have the exposure of the artists, even though our stage crew can wear masks 100% of the time and will. That's not the case with our artists. When the actors on stage, they're not wearing masks. We can put masks on our musicians in the pit, in the orchestra pit. But when the vocalist is singing over that pit, that aspiration, that projection goes down and falls in the pit. It goes across into the audience who will be wearing masks. But we're looking at remote pits. Do we move our orchestra to some other location within the theater and pipe that sound in electronically? It's safety is paramount to everything that we're doing, and those are some of the difficulties we're dealing with.
Is there a network of executives like you in New York, in London? Are you all, like, kind of collectively trying to think these things through? Uh,
We are. There's the Broadway League that we're all members of, and there are 28 task forces on the Broadway League, all dealing with specialty issues. Um, and then you layer the 8 to 11 different unions on top of that are national, regional, national, local, regional, national, international unions, all developing their own protocols. It's the Wild West right now as everybody's trying to do the right thing from a safety perspective, but who pays for it too?
mhm.
So that's a
Right.
whole other nightmare.
Well, and there was a lot on your plate before COVID hit, and obviously it sounds like you're very focused on what needs to be done now to respond to these current challenges. But I wonder if you can provide an update on where some of the work that you are doing with the lighting framework plan. And I know
So,
you're behind the lighting up the merchandise mart and the lyric opera.
so lighting is one of those things that can be enjoyed in isolation. You can drive down the street and enjoy some art exhibit that appears at night. Uh, it is one of those things that part of what we do is the Luma Festival, the Light Up My Arts Festival, which is a parade on State Street. You know, not the best time for parades, but it's part of what happens with a not-for-profit like that, and with the lighting initiative. It again relies on philanthropic support and sponsorship support. So it's that tug of war right now. We're bred in circuses while Rome is burning to some degree. And it's how you do what you do and when you do it that we're all dealing with.
So we're down to our last minute, and I will take an educated guess that the people that have signed on to watch and listen to your words of wisdom are people that really care about the cultural community. So what is your ask to our audience? What can we do to help?
Number one, it's find a theater and sponsor them. Write a check. It's support the League of Chicago Theaters and the Illinois Arts Council. You know, I really don't want to talk my objective was not to talk just about theater, though you can see with the level of detail and intricacies, there's an awful lot to talk about there. But it's no different when you talk about the lyric opera, when you talk about the Joffrey. These are all the bigger they are, the harder they fall. They are everybody's in tough shape. So if you go to theater, if you enjoy arts, support it. Write them a check.
Well, I have to admit, I have a heavy heart talking to you, and I will certainly be doing my part to support the arts. Lou, thank you so much for your leadership
Thanks.
and all that you have done to build such a strong and vibrant cultural community, and we will work together to make sure that it comes back strongly. So
Thanks.
thank you for your support. Thank you for
Take
your
care.
friendship. To our audience, I want to say thank you for tuning in. Next week, we have two very important webinars. On Tuesday, we will have the Secretary of Commerce for the state of Wisconsin and the head of the Greater Milwaukee Committee. So if you're interested in how Wisconsin is responding and helping its businesses, it's a conversation you won't want to miss. And then on Thursday, a week from today, we have committed the Deputy Governor for the state of Illinois for education. So again, if you're part of the education community or you have children in schools, you won't want to miss that webinar. Watch your emails for details. So with that, again, thank you, Lou. I'm signing
Thanks.
off. Have a great day, everybody.
Take
Stay
care.
well and stay strong. Bye.